this morning, Bridget Phillipson. Good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. So as Leo has just mentioned, the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill gets its second reading today. There's quite a lot in it, which I want to get to. Is the main point of it to protect vulnerable children?
Yes, this is the single biggest piece of child protection legislation in a generation. We are determined that we have to make sure that our children are protected. This is work that has been underway for some time. So some of the key measures are around making sure we know where children are, what you were just talking about there in terms of home education. Alongside that, that we have information about, all information about what's going on in a child's life, so pulling that together. And multi-agency child protection teams, so police, education, children's social care, sharing that, keeping children safe, because we've heard a lot in recent days about the lessons that we have to learn. I've had enough of learning lessons. Now is the time to take action to protect children. One of the key areas where we know there has been failure time and again is where children aren't listened to, where action isn't taken, and where those who are meant to be working to protect children don't do that. And what I would say in terms of the choice today in what's happening in Parliament is that the Conservatives can back this, or as they're proposing, can kill stone dead this key landmark legislation. They have spent the last week or so touring studios like this, telling your viewers that they care about keeping children safe. Well, they should put up or shut up, vote for this legislation and do precisely that. Or is it all about grabbing a cheap headline and political opportunism?
There's a lot to get to because there's other details in the bill, which I guess a second reading debate is all about. But one thing I think, given the debates or arguments of the last couple of weeks that you're alluding to, that's interesting and to be absolutely clear on, this bill aiming to protect vulnerable children has been in the works from this government for many months, not in reaction to the last couple of weeks.
No, absolutely. This was work that we developed in opposition. It's been clear for some time what needs to change. We need to listen to victims, we need to listen to children and deliver what they need. Alongside that, we've had a lot of discussion in recent days about the response to Alexis Jay's national review. Again, across government, for some time, we've been working to respond to that, and that's why the Home Secretary was able to set out the plans to bring forward legislation around mandatory reporting. So if people know abuse is going on, they have a responsibility to report it and to take action.
So we'll move on. Let's move on to the Alexis Phillips report and the grooming scandal, which has been talked about so much in the last couple of weeks. Is the government pledging to introduce all 20 of Alexis Phillips's recommendations? And is there a timeline of when that will be achieved?
So that work was well underway, well ahead of Christmas, and my department was working on that with colleagues across government. This is a cross-cutting national report that requires action from many of us. So we're looking very closely at all of the recommendations as quickly as we can, where we can move quickly on the areas where it is most straightforward. For example, around mandatory reporting. So if people know that there is abuse going on, they have a responsibility to report it. We will legislate. The measures that I'm setting out today in the legislation in many ways go further, because it puts a requirement on all councils to have teams working to keep children safe. And the bandwagon jumpers that have come along in recent days, they don't care about children. They don't care about making sure that we stop this and we take action. They had years to do it and they didn't do it. And victims and children and survivors have been failed. So let's just get on and do what is necessary to keep children safe in our country. I
said Alexis Phillips there. I should have said Alexis Jay. My apologies in terms of her inquiry. Interestingly, there's a lot of mudslinging in both directions, all directions, about what people do and don't care about. I am interested, though, in what Alexis Jay said yesterday as it relates to Elon Musk's comments in the last couple of weeks. She didn't support people politicising her report in the overall grooming scandal, but she did say the row may have given this some kind of impetus to move forward. Do you agree that that has happened? It has been given an extra impetus, an extra focus?
I'm not interested in what he's got to say. All I'm interested in is how we keep children. I appreciate that. I'm interested in how we protect children and keep them safe from harm. And as I've been clear, we were working already on her national review, a national review which the Conservatives established, which we backed because it was absolutely the right thing to do, to understand how we tackle child abuse in all of its forms across our country. But what did they do with that review? It reported in 2022. They sat on it, and some of the very same people who were ministers, including in the Home Office, are now coming out and saying it's a national scandal that nothing happened. I agree it's a national scandal that nothing happened. Do they own a mirror? I mean, they are the very people that are responsible for the failure to act. And they are the same very people today, the Conservatives, who intend to block our legislation to keep children safe. I thought there wasn't a limit to how far they would sink, and I was wrong.
I mean, clearly the legislation will pass if Labour want it to pass, given the majority. Let's move on to the other parts of the bill, because clearly it is the Wellbeing and Schools bill, and the schools aspect is perhaps, I can't speak for them, they'll come on in an hour, some of the areas they push back on. One area that's got quite a lot of focus is the bill's aim to impose the national curriculum more rigidly on all schools, including academies, and to impose national pay scales, on all teachers. Will that reduce flexibility?
No, it's about increasing flexibility, because I've seen some brilliant examples in academies of how they've supported teachers, particularly around flexible working, and we face a big challenge around women in their 30s leaving teaching as they find it difficult to combine work and family life. So I've seen some great examples, but I want that to be available actually to all schools in a way that it's not at the moment. The measures around schools are about putting children right at the heart of this, about driving up standards and making sure that all children, wherever they are in the country, whichever school they go to, can expect a brilliant education. So yes, the national curriculum applying in all schools. That was something actually that the Conservatives back in the 80s introduced. I think that was a good principle then. I think it's a good principle now to make sure that there is a core entitlement for all of our children. I also want children to be taught by qualified teachers who've gone through that training and have got that ongoing professional development and induction. I find it staggering that they're opposed to teachers being qualified in front of the classroom. I mean, I find that just bizarre. But alongside that, the measures in the bill also include areas that I think will make a big difference to children and families and to many of your viewers. So rolling out breakfast clubs across our primary schools, a big support for families. Alongside that, cutting the cost of school uniforms, so limiting the number of branded items that families are expected to buy for their children. All really important cost of living measures, but alongside that, a focus on driving high standards in every school in our country.
And just to clarify this point, because it's interesting how the debate's been framed, should the best teachers be allowed to be paid more?
As part of the process that we'll go through should this legislation pass, we will bring in a new paying conditions framework for teachers. No teachers will have their pay cut, but we do want to look at how we deliver flexibility across the system. So that's pay and its conditions, but it's about a core standard, a core entitlement, not just in children's experience in the classroom, but also for our brilliant teachers, because the single biggest way that we can drive up standards is by having well-qualified, well-supported teachers at the front of the class.
Is that set by government, though, not by head teachers?
The process is that we would give this to the school teacher review body as part of that process. This will be a long process. This will not happen overnight. It is important to get it right. But I think it is reasonable to expect there to be core national standards across our country so that parents can expect and parents can know that when their children go to school, they get a brilliant education.
Just finally wanted to touch on borrowing costs. Hit a high not seen for over a decade yesterday. This is largely a global move in bond yields, America, continental Europe as well. If this continues, it might need to lead to pressure on the Chancellor in the spring statement in a couple of months. If it means changing of plans, whether that's spending cuts or tax increases or borrowing increases because of a global move, is that a legitimate reason to backtrack on a previous promise that there wouldn't be spending cuts?
So I'm not going to speculate on where we might get to through the spending review process, but in terms of the principles of this and how the Chancellor will approach it, she's been clear that economic stability is crucial. We saw what happened previously when that wasn't the case. But we've got a clear set of fiscal rules that we will stick to. And that has meant that we've had to take tough choices in the last budget, although we were able to prioritise areas such as education and schools. But of course, the Chancellor will look carefully at the situation as we go through the spending review process.
Thank you so much for joining us, Bridget Phillipson, Secretary of State for Education.